So if you've been following the channel, then you'll know that one of the first things I did when I bought the property was to have a well drilled. Well, after much debate, I decided to go and head and drill the well. Drilling company's here today, and so far they've got 150 feet down. Let's hope it's not too deep. And that's an expensive beast. It costs a lot of money. But I didn't make the decision lightly, because in my mind, then we're demanding too much of our natural resources. And so the more wells you drill, the more strain it puts on the water table. In the end, I decided that it would be a necessity, because here we are going to hold meditation retreats, and we might have 16 or 20 guests. And the rainwater harvester just cannot cope with that. The other thing is, the retreats happen when the weather's nice. And when the weather's nice, there's no rain. So our tank will just deplete very quickly. So for the last 2 years, I've just been relying on the rainwater, and that's actually totally sufficient for me and a couple of people. But now we've got our first retreat, and it's happening in a couple of weeks. I've got no choice. Basically, I have to install the pump. And again, drilling the well is expensive, and also installing the equipment, the pump and the electricity is very expensive. You have to pay an electrician, etc. So what I'm going to do now is prepare the well and drop the pump down. And I'll go through the process. And some of you might wonder, well, why on earth are you posting these videos? Well, one, it's to keep people abreast of the narrative, what's going on here at the retreat. Some of the followers might be interested in what we're doing. In fact, some of you will be coming in a couple of weeks. Also, as you know, we're going to have a Karma Yoga retreat in September. And that's where people will gather together, and then we'll build an organic garden. In the future, this garden will supplement our diet here, so that people can practice and meditate and eat good, healthy, organic food. So the rainwater harvester will be reserved for the garden, for growing things, for watering, sanitation. For example, we'll have to build guest showers and toilets. And then this well can be used primarily for drinking water and the main visitor center, the cabin, where people will stay and where they can get water. Also, we can send water for drinking down to the campsite. So the first thing I need to do is I need to dig a trench. I need to access the side of the well casing so I can put the pitless adapter in. You might ask, why should I put a pitless adapter in? Well, that's so that your pipes don't freeze. You drop it down below the frost line, and luckily here the weather is quite mild. And so the frost line is only about 18 inches. And I can put the pitless adapter in only about 2 feet. But in Saskatchewan, or Alberta, where I'm from, then your frost line is something like 6 feet deep. And winters are very hard, and you have to dig a very deep trench and put the wire and the pipe in very deep. But here it's only shallow. So I need to get the excavator, I need to expose the well casing so I can put the pitless adapter in, and also I need to dig a trench all the way to the cabin, because the pipe is going to be buried underground. Also, something that's really important is to lay out the pipe and the rope and the electric cable. The pipe has been coiled up for a long time, so it's all bent and kinky, and if we stretch it out, it will relax overnight. And then tomorrow, when we put everything together, we tape the wire and the rope and everything together, it'll be a bit easier. If you're a professional, then you will use a cable drum, probably on a special trailer with a winch on it. It's much easier, but it's just too expensive. Even to rent one wouldn't be worth it. So what we'll do is we'll get a couple of guys and we'll put the pump down manually. That means we're going to lay out the pipe and tape the cable and the rope to that, and then feed it all in. But we'll go through the process. First thing I need to do is I need to clear some earth away from here and access the well casing, and also I need to stretch out the pipe and the cable, etc., so they can all be assembled. One thing you have to understand is I'm a newbie. When I was in Nepal at the monastery, I was the engineer responsible for providing water and electricity for about 150 people. Here it's a much smaller scale project, and although I've worked on a lot of pumps, I've never actually sunk a submersible deep well pump, because in Nepal we had a spring on the side of the river, and also we used shallow wells, so jet pumps. This is a totally different beast, and that means I've got to learn some new skills. But I did a lot of research on YouTube, and if you do so as well, you can save yourself a lot of money. Now remember, these videos are strictly for entertainment purposes. I'm not responsible if you do something stupid, and it's up to you to follow your local code. So get an electrician to install it for you. But there are ways in which you can save money. For example, in assembling the equipment, if you know what you're doing. Be careful because you're dealing with water and electricity, and also you don't want to make a mistake and then cost yourself a lot of money. So let's have a look at it. So now we've got our trench dug, the next thing to do is to lay a bit of conduit. And so we can put the pipe and the wire under the road and protect it from sharp stones. As you know, this ground is very, very stony. It doesn't really have to be watertight. And the wire itself is submersible, but we'll do our best to sheathe it. You can use corrugated drain pipe, all sorts of things. But I've got some leftover 3-inch pipe here. I'm going to try to use that, save a bit of money. Just lay this pipe in there. The 4-strand well wire fits nicely inside of this 1-inch conduit. And I'll glue these together as well, although it's not really necessary, strictly necessary. It may help with the longevity of the wire. It also means we can pull the wire in the future if there's a problem. I think even if we get a large truck coming through here, heavy truck, the pipe will be protected. Adaptor. So now the next thing we need to do is install the pitless adapter. So basically this means that the discharge of the well can come out of the side of the casing below the frost line. And here in Vancouver Island, then that's 18 inches. So typically this will be installed 2 feet below the ground level. What we need to do is drill a hole in the side of the casing and then insert the pitless adapter. So what you need is a hole drilling saw. And get a good one. It's going to be able to cut metal. And also you're going to have to use a drill that has very speed, so you can drill slowly. Also, you should use some oil to cut that. It's going to make the job a lot easier. So we're going to put this in the side of the casing, 2 feet below the ground level. Just about there. That's about perfect. Clean that up a bit. So you want to drill slowly, and hopefully this bit will be sufficient. There you go, 1 3/4 inch hole for the pitless adapter. Just clean that out a bit. So now it's time to install the pitless adapter. As I said before, the pitless adapter is this fancy bit of bronze that allows the discharge pipe to come out of the side of the casing below the frost line, so your lines don't freeze up, and then it can travel underground all the way to your house. And what we have to do is we have to drop this down, insert it from the inside, bring it to the casing and place it in a hole, and then put the securing nut on. And so for that job, then what you need to do is make some kind of tool, improvised homemade tool. Now really ideally I should have a bit of iron pipe on the bottom of that, but I couldn't find the right length piece of iron pipe, so I put a bit of poly pipe with some inserts on it. It's basically a T-bar. This allows you to fish the pitless adapter down to the hole through the side. My mate can hold that, and then I can fasten it. These were all threaded with a Stilson, or as a pipe wrench as you would call it here in America. And so there's no chance of that coming undone. When you install the pitless adapter, then I recommend that you put a plug in there. This is to stop it from sliding off. The pitless adapter is designed to come apart. So you stick this through the well casing, and then you can take the top off, put it on the end of your pipe, and when the pipe goes down through the well casing, fits snugly in there, drop it in, and there's a good seal. So you'll need to remove the outer securing nut and also the pipe flange and one of the rubber washers. This is a shaped pipe clamp, a flange. It fits the side of the casing, 6-inch casing. And then there's a rather large rubber washer. We're going to take those off because they need to go on the outside. So what you'll notice is that the pitless adapter has threads on both sides, but the top is blank. There's no port there, so you can identify which one's which. Your tool, the T-bar, goes on the top, the blank port, and you can screw that on there. You don't need any kind of tape or sealant. It's not a water seal. It's just temporarily to install the adapter. And now I'm going to install a safety pin. The safety pin needs to stick out a bit so you don't forget it's in there when you install the pump. Okay, so we've got one rubber washer for the inside, got the T-bar connected, safety pin in, and now we can drop it down. Hopefully you can see what's going on. I'm going to remove the plastic packer to keep crap out of the well. Okay, and now my helper is going to fish the pitless adapter down on the end of our homemade tool. Okay, we'll lower down the pitless adapter. Okay, up a bit. Okay, that's it. If I can grab a hold of that. Perfect. So you can see there, then the tool has brought the pitless adapter through the hole. Now I gotta stick on this outer washer, rubber washer. The pipe flange is shaped for the 6-inch pipe. So make sure you get it on so it sits snugly against the casing. And then we can do up the nut. Give a thought for the soldiers in Ukraine. They live in trenches like this. and you'll be able to see that the flange starts compressing on the side of the pipe casing, and you're nearly there. So then we can take out the safety pin, and this is the magic bit. You can just pull out the pitless adapter. Go on, pull it out, pull it straight up. And you see, you've got the pitless adapter ready to go on the end of the well pipe. So it's nearly getting time to attach the pump to the pipe and sink it into the well. Before we do that, then we have to assemble the pump, because this one, Pentek, comes in two parts. There's the impeller section, and there's the motor, the heavy bit. I've got to join these two together. And there's various hardware that comes with the kit, and often different types of rubber washers. And we need to know what to do with these. To start off with, there's the gasket for the motor, and that has to go ridge down over the mounting nuts. It will fit in there nicely. And then we've got a sand boot or a sand slinger. The boot is for where your pump is very deep, very near the bottom of the well, and the well is sandy. And it protects the shaft and the motor from sand. Our pump is a few hundred feet above the bottom, so that's probably not an issue. We need to install something, and we'll install the sand slinger. So this just chucks away any debris that might enter into the impeller or into the motor shaft. And this has to go with the fat end down over the top of the spindle. Also, make sure that this stainless steel washer is in place. And while you're there, give the motor a spin just to make sure there's no factory defect. And that's going to sit right down on top of that washer. And it's going to fill the gap between the shaft of the impeller casing and the motor. Next, we're going to need a Phillips screwdriver, and we're going to remove the wire conduit from the side of the pump. The wire needs to be threaded up that. And we need to remove the screen. The fitting kit comes with extra screws for this. They only insert one on each side. You need to put two in when you're done. The reason why we need to take this off is because we're going to need to get in there in order to fasten the nuts. You can check the shaft on the impeller casing. This one shocked me a bit because it has the usual up and down play, but it also has a lot of side to side play. But this is a Pentek unit, and they have what's called a floating impeller system. So once it spins, the water circulating inside the impeller casing keeps it in the right place. I had to confirm that with Selena from Andrew Sherritt because I was a bit worried, but that's normal, that play. So then we're going to fit the impeller casing on to the motor, and you might have to spin it a bit or wiggle it in order to get the shafts to align. They're a bit like the drive shafts on a gearbox. So we've got our gasket in place, the sand slinger, I don't know if you can see that. That's filling the gap between the two, and now what we need to do is fasten these two together. I didn't see any torque specifications for this, but what I was told is that you don't have to be shy with these. Stainless steel nuts, tighten them. I would tighten them in sequence. So tighten one, then the other side, and then go around again and again until they're all equally tight. That's just generally good practice when mating together two mechanical shafts. On a gearbox or in an engine, it's the same. For this one then, we're going to need a 13mm spanner, or a open face wrench as you might call it. This will draw them together, so tighten it as much as you can by hand first, and then tighten in sequence, going crisscross. And don't be shy. Stainless steel bolts, stainless steel nuts. With this small spanner, I'm not going to strip anything. You don't want it coming loose later on, right? The nuts actually have lock heads on them. they're not nylon lock heads. And we'll go around and tighten all those up. There's a deer over there grazing. Looking right at us. Loads of deer here. It's a nice thing about being here in the forest. Part of the idea of this DIY stuff is that we want to be as independent as possible here. I mean, I hope that these videos will be useful to some people. For example, when I was going to assemble this unit, then I did some research online. And you can ask the people at the shop as well, they're very helpful. I use Andrew Sherritt. They're a really well-established firm here in British Columbia, and they know what they're talking about. You'll always get good advice. But whatever you can do yourself, then you're going to save a lot of money. And for us, what we want to do is have free meditation retreats here for people. So we have to provide them with somewhere to sleep, something to eat, somewhere to go to the toilet, and fresh drinking water. And if we have to do everything, pay for everything, then it means we have to ask for a lot of money in donations, and I don't like that. We need to be more independent. Eventually here we're going to plant a garden. The garden will be watered from the rainwater collector that I mentioned before. And we'll supplement our diet in that way. And if we attract people here who have got skills, for example, gardening, carpentry, etc., then they can contribute to the project. Part of the problem, as I can see it, is that we've become dependent upon the nanny state, as they call it in Britain. So the government is too big and has too much control and influence in our lives. Of course, you've got to protect people. You have to protect the lowest common denominator. But there are people with skills. I think this mentality has to change. Regulations have to be reduced. This is being done in Germany, for example, so that it's easier to build and to get on with your life. And people who are less capable, a bit more foolish, they need to be protected. But that doesn't mean that you should slow down or impede those who are able to do things themselves. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. That's nice and tight. And we need to run the cable up the side and put it into the cable housing. This is just to keep everything tidy, hold it into place. Looks tight. We don't see the bears around here anymore. When my neighbor moved here, then a bear used to sleep under her porch. There are wolves and cougars. I think the cougars are very, very shy. Probably won't see them very often. Mostly we see squirrels and birds around here. It's funny, it's one of the things that people ask me when they're going to come here for a retreat is whether there's bears. Because many people are afraid of bears. And Canada's got a reputation, right? Gotta make sure those cables are lying flat. And then I've got to attach a mesh. We're nearly done. Make sure these are all pretty tight. Wouldn't want to lose a screw down in the well. No way to fix it unless you pull the pump up. And that's more work than I want to do. I think the procedure is more or less the same for all 4-inch pumps with an external motor. And there we go. One pump ready to insert in the well. So now I need to attach the end of the pipe to the pump. And that's going to be the same process as before. The difference being that we've got an extra long adapter and it's got a larger thread on it because the top of the pump has got a 1.5 inch and not a 1 inch. So we need to stick this on there. Just checking that is 1.5 inch. That's going to thread on top of the pump. and this has to go on the end of the pulley pipe. Same as before. With these you can get 3 or 4 joy clamps, stainless steel clamps on there, so I might add some extra. I've got some. So first thing we'll do is attach the adapter to the pump housing, and for that we need to use PTFE and pipe sealant as before. I'm going to say it again, but roll this clockwise. Also, if you have it coming out from underneath the PTFE spool, it will tighten as you apply it. Believe it or not, and many people struggle with this notion. A few rubs of that, and then some of this extremely goopy and messy stuff. And we'll attach that to the end of the pump. Make sure it's all clean inside. Try not to get myself all covered in grey crap today. It's turning out to be a nice morning. Gonna have to take my vest off soon. Getting hot. I'm gonna use the Stilton for that. It's too big. I'm sure I've got a bigger crescent wrench somewhere. In fact, I'm gonna need it, because you need one on the pump and one on the fitting. See if we can get these wires out of the way for a minute. There we go. Okay, now we need to insert this pipe on the end of this pump. Now we're going to install the torque arrestor. This one comes in 2 pieces, so it can be inserted on the pipe afterwards. The job of the torque arrestor is to stop the pump from wiggling about too much in the well, especially when it starts and stops and it tends to jerk to one side. It's got a centrifugal force and it wants to spin, and this keeps it stable and reduces the wear on the equipment deep down in the well. And we can attach this as close as you can get. This is basically just a shock absorber, goes inside the pipe. Once we've installed the torque arrestor, then it's going to be time to make the waterproof connection on the wires. That's quite a critical thing to do. You don't want to go wrong. And the thing about the torque arrestor is that it should be bowed out a bit, because it's going to sit inside against the walls of the well casing, and it technically should be 6 inches in diameter, but if it's too bowed out, then it's going to cause friction when you drop the pump into the well. So you just want to bow it out a little bit like this. That should be about right. Just under 6 inches. So now we've got the crucial underwater wire connection. For this we've got some specialized shrink wrap, heavy duty shrink wrap, along with some inserts. And we have to put these on the ends of the wire, and the wires should be long enough that they fully insert into the crimp. So we're going to crimp those first. So we'll cut the ends of those wires off first, crimp them, and then shrink wrap them. So you're going to want to place the shrink wrap on the wire. Now this doesn't have to be done right next to the pump. To me it doesn't make much difference where you put it. It's going to be underwater. The most important thing is that it makes a good seal. So we're going to put on the shrink wrap first, and then we'll crimp the butt connectors to the wire and heat it up with a blowtorch. Okay, so once that's been connected, it's going to rest somewhere up here on the pipe. I'm going to twist the ends of the wires to give them a better connection. Some people say you should strip these wires down to the pump, but there's all kinds of stuff down there that you don't want to get hot. Oh, that one works not too bad. Works okay. These ones seem to work pretty good. These crimps are very soft, that's why. Okay, it's time to do the heat shrink. I'm going to isolate that wire so we can heat it up. I'm going to use a blowtorch. You could use a paint stripping gun, even a lighter. I think a blowtorch is going to be easier. Make sure the wire is clean. The heat shrink has a sealing agent in it. And so when it heats up, then it will ooze out, and that will help it to seal. And we're going to heat it near the middle first, so it shrinks first in the middle and then outwards, so that it seals the liquid outside. And you can heat this, you can see it starts to shrink pretty quickly. If you're burning it, then maybe pull away a bit. So I'm heating it in the center first, and then moving outwards. Keep it moving. Got a hot torch. Don't cook the wire. Okay, that's one. And you can see that there's plastic goop that oozes out the ends. That's there to help seal the wire. Make sure the heat shrink is in the middle. Next one. Get it all the way around. Try not to jar the wire. Now it's time to attach our retrieving rope and the wire to the pipe all the way along the 320-foot length of the pipe. Now the hole on the side of the pump is too small for this 3/8 inch poly rope. So what I've got is a alloy carabiner. I don't know if I trust that much, so I'm going to also put a rolling hitch around the pump body in case that fails. So I've got to leave enough here for a rolling hitch, if you've ever made a rolling hitch. And then I'm going to put in on the carabiner, I'm going to attach a water bowline. So that's what you use maybe to attach your anchor to a boat. So we need enough for a rolling hitch here. Once, twice, 3 times, that should be good. And here we're going to make a water bowline. So this goes under, and the bowline rope. Make a rather small bowline. And hopefully with the leftover, I'll be able to secure a rolling hitch onto it, just in case we get into trouble. Make this all tight and snug. You can do an ordinary bowline or an anchor wrap, or you can use a climbing hitch if you like. That'll all work fine. Attach that to the pump. Secure the nut. That's going to sit in there. Okay. We'll let the bowline take the strain and have the rolling hitches back up. And the whole lot then can hang off of that rope. Now what we need to do is attach the wire and the rope along the side of the pipe all the way up. So now we've got the pipe, wire, and the retrieving line all joined together, strung out along the forest path. The last thing to do is to put the pitless adapter on the end. You don't have to do this right now. You can sink this into the well and attach it at the last minute, but we're short-handed, and what we're going to do is we're going to put it all in one go. So somebody will stand at the back, hold the T-bar, follow the pipe, and Clinton and I will feed the pipe down into the well and do it all in one go. So first we need to put on the nipple, and that's going to require some PTFE tape and a bit of sealant, and then we're going to heat up the pipe and stick it on the end of the pipe. Thread tape goes on clockwise as usual. I brought some gloves this time. Protects my hands from the sealant, which is very messy. Put a bit of this on there. I always put too much. I guess you can't put too much, as they say. And then this is the end of the pipe. Let's go to port. So you know it's the right side. The tool's on the blank side. Make that nice and tight. Stick the Stilson on there. Do the same routine here. Heat up the pipe a little bit. Have to actually be quite careful not to start a forest fire out here. And please remember, if you find this useful or even entertaining, then why don't you subscribe, like, give us a follow, paste some comments or share the videos. What we're trying to do is establish a meditation retreat. And in order to do that successfully, we need to be monetized. We need to try to pay for things. And the traditional systems in the monasteries in the East basically aren't going to work here in the West. And so we're looking for new ways of doing it, using social media, generating interest in the narrative to see if we can encourage people to get involved. It's not just a meditation project. We're thinking about sustainability as well, the environment. There'd be a way of living in the world that's a bit different than our traditional ways of doing things. And you yourself might not be interested in meditation, Or you might think that you'll come here one day and participate. What we're trying to do is provide opportunities for everyone who's interested, and also do it for free. We're trying to develop a gifting economy and primarily an environment that's conducive to the practice of the Dharma, which is essentially, in a nutshell, loving kindness and compassion for all beings. Whoa. Okay. Well, I don't think it's in any danger of falling off anytime soon. Can barely get it on. Okay, that's it. That's the last bit. Now we can thread the pipe and the pump down the well, and hopefully, without much effort, slide it onto the Pitless adapter. And then we need to look at the compression tank and the electrical setup. We're going to pull from that end and it will go, and you're just going to guide this bit. You can hold it here if you like.
Okay, yeah.
Hold it here, like this. You're going to face forward. Okay?
Yeah.
And just make sure it doesn't get caught on anything.
Yeah.
And we'll do all the... We'll use that later. And then we just need to sort out the rope and the wire. So get the rope as tight as you can. There's some slack in there, but the pipe and the pump will slowly relax down into the hole, and that will become tighter. If the pipe fails, or one of the connections, then you can retrieve the pump, because this is connected directly down to the pump itself. So we've got a hanger here. We'll make that off. And the next thing we need to do is to fix the electric connection. Okay, so I don't have the right bits for the conduit, but there was that tool we just made. So I've used that little bit of pipe. 3/4 inch pipe threads into a 1-inch poly. You get the picture. So now we've got the cable and the conduit. We need to connect the wires from the deep well submersible pump to the power source, main fuse box. On this one, green is the ground cable, and very important that the entire pump system be grounded to the well casing. And so they've provided a ground strap here, and we'll crimp the wire onto that. So we'll cut these just long enough that we can tuck the wires back inside. And I'll keep the well wires the same, because I'm going to use a bit of that wire for installation on the inside. First we'll strip. Really be good to solder this and then crimp it in, but this should be fine. And we'll do the same with the supply wire coming from the cod. And now we can strip the wires, connect color to color. Nothing funny going on here. have this funny thing, I always cut my wires too short. It's kind of OCD thing. Trying not to waste wire. But really, just make your life difficult if you don't leave enough. You may have noticed I always use Napoli mosquito repellent, an old egg box, burning slowly. Keeps the bugs away. We can tape that lot up. Stick it back down inside the well. And close up the cap, hopefully for a very long time. That's it. The pump is sunk down to the bottom of the well. The electrics are connected. The service pipes to the cabin are all installed and the trench has been covered up. Now down here, you don't need anything special. It's just an adapter with a barbed fitting on it to attach your 1-inch pipe that goes down to the house. So normally you're going to have a check valve, a one-way valve down at the compression tank, but I've put mine here. In fact, what I have is a barbed adapter, a check valve, and then a little T. So that's a T that has 2 poly pipes coming out of it. And on this side, I've got a ball valve and another bit of pipe. And then this bit goes down to the cabin. Down at the cabin, then you need to connect it to the compression tank. And I'm going to show you how to do that as well. But everything's installed. Now the reason why I have this branch here, I've got a T and an extra bit of pipe, is because I want to be able to send water down to the campsite when we have meditation retreats. And also I want to be able to top up the cistern when it's empty. For example, in summer we get a lot of drought. That means I can top up some water into the cistern. We can use the cistern to water the garden and for the guest toilets. So there's something very important that you need to do when everything's connected. That is, you need to do a first run, and it's to prevent sand blocking. That means what you need to do is to run the pump with the valve open only a third until the water comes through clean and free of sand and sediment. And you can use a glass to see if there's anything settling in the water itself. And then once the water is clear at 1/3, then you can open up the valve to 2/3 and then pump it full. So now I need to show you how to install the compression tank. And if I do this underneath the house, you're not going to be able to see what's going on. So I'll just assemble it here on the deck, and then I can put it in situ later. The most important piece that you've got for this is the tank T. And you'll see it's got loads of ports on it. So you might be wondering what that's for. And you also need to connect a gate valve. So you can shut off the service to the house if you need to change a pipe or something inside. Other critical components are the pressure gauge. You would have seen one of these. There'll be a tap off point. That's so you can drain the tank if you need to work on it. So that goes into the T. And very important is a pressure release valve. So this is a pressurized canister, and if the pressure builds up inside and there's no way for it to release, then something could burst or explode and potentially explode in your face, maybe even with hot water. So these are essential. In fact, you need this by code. This is a pressure switch, and it tells the pump when it needs to kick in. And you might be wondering why you need a compression tank. And that's because the hardest thing on the pump is when it stops and starts. And if every time you needed to wash your hands or rinse a plate inside, then the well pump had to come on, it would be starting and stopping very many times, and it's going to burn out more quickly. So in order to reduce the strain on the pump, then what happens is the well pump fills this compression tank, and the compression tank holds a certain amount of water and holds it at a particular pressure. And so, for example, if I'm washing the dishes, then this pressure will decrease, and only when it needs to be refilled, then the pressure switch will kick in and tell the pump it needs to come on, and it'll refill the pressure in the tank. So the first thing we have to do is put the T on there, and that's a threaded fitting. So same as before. Then we need a bit of PTFE tape and some sealant. And one thing you should know is that this has a nut on it, this T. Means you can assemble all the stuff, and then you don't have to wind it on to the stem. You can just clamp it on with the nut. So we'll need a bit of PTFE, as usual. Sometimes these plumbing fittings can seem a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. So it's good if you play around with them, figure out exactly what you need to do. For the application I've got, it's a little bit strange anyway. And so that means I had to play around with it a lot to make it fit. I think it's okay if you've got a new build and everything's purpose built, right? So you've got a little space in the basement where you can put the compression tank and all the services, the pipes and the wires are all put in by professionals. Here we're attaching the pump to a log cabin, an old log cabin. So things are never quite right because I've got basically a 3/4 inch copper pipe underneath there. And I had to make that match the 1 inch. Let's put that on there. And then we can tighten it up with a wrench. Make sure you don't strip it. It's brass or bronze on iron. So one will cut into the other if you tighten too much. That seems to be going on okay. Not going to leak. Okay, make sure you don't lose the washer on that. Now we need to assemble our T. So your service pipe that's coming into the tank can come either side, but here the poly pipe underground is coming in on this side, and then we need to add on the various components. It doesn't actually matter which order you put them in. Normally you'll put a check valve here at the beginning somewhere. As I said before, then we've got a bit of a strange setup here. So the check valve is back by the wellhead, but normally you'll put a check valve in somewhere here, and you can have the gate valve before this or after this. I'm putting it after. That means I've got all the compression tank and everything fitted, and if I want to turn off the water to the house, then I can do it after that. There's an argument for doing it before. If you've got the gate valve here, then you can shut off the water before it gets to the compression tank, and then you can work on that. But I can always just turn off the pump, so it's not a problem. So there will be an elbow fitted on here where the service pipe comes in. That's the first thing. And that I will put on with PTFE and sealant as usual. It's important the angle of this elbow. It needs to point in the right direction. Otherwise, the service pipe's not going to fit into it. It's going to be a bit difficult. I'm going to have to insert this on the end of the pipe with a barbed adapter. I think normally you would convert that poly pipe into a service pipe, which is a slightly different external diameter, and you put compression fittings on it. The barbed fittings are probably stronger. Get that on, and I need this one to go something like that. So I'll have to play with it once I get the pipe on. It needs to be something like that. We've got two other pieces that need to go on. One's a tap off point. That's again just so you can drain off the tank if you need to service it. Very important pressure release valve. This is required by code, I believe, certainly around here. Remember, it's a pressurized tank, so things can explode. Tap like that so I can get a hose on it. There's not a lot of clearance in there. And then your pressure gauge, I'll put that on the outside so it's easier to read. Make sure the water pressure is nominal. There's a small port in the bottom of the pressure gauge. Make sure you don't block that with anything. Don't get any goop in there. Tighten that from the nut, because these things are quite flimsy. If you try to tighten with the actual gauge itself, you might break something off. Turn it outside slightly so I can read it from outside. That, something like that. And now we need to install the pressure switch. This tells the pump when to turn on and off. And for this you need to use a small nipple to raise it up out of the way. Again, use the nut to tighten it, because you might break the plastic housing if you put too much force on that. Also want to make sure everything clears the tank. Wires will be able to go in and out. Okay. Now we just need the discharge end. Now this has a coupling on it, and that's because it might be a little bit tricky installing this onto the house input. So this means that I can attach it at a later time. So I can stick that on, and then I can attach gate valve and everything else I need on there, and then tighten it up just when I get it connected to the actual pipe that serves the house. Okay. We'll go on like that, and now we're ready to connect the water. So the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Here's our first test run. Just going to open this 1/3 and clear the sediment from the well. Eureka! Tastes good. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a water sample. And these kits come from the local testing agency. I think it's a good idea the first time that you drill a well to check the quality, because there can be all kinds of contaminants and also sometimes things like arsenic from minerals in the ground. So you'll need to fill up one of these test kits and bring it to the tester within 24 hours, and the water should be kept refrigerated as well. Well, that's it. So I hope that things go well for you in the future and that you experience nothing but health and well-being. Maybe I should open a wellness center here. Well, I'd better be going now before I embarrass myself anymore.